Good afternoon, traders, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're at in the globe. Stacey, Burke Trading. We're doing the daily trading report, and we're reviewing the Asian, London, and New York trading sessions for Wednesday, November the 4th, 2015. Now, I've had a few people email me and ask me some questions, and I'm just going to go over a couple of really simple concepts today. Specifically, I mainly focus on the London session for intraday trading, and I use hourly charts. Now, obviously, we can get a bit more detailed with shorter time frames and some other things, but I've been trying to stick with some really simple concepts of support and resistance. And today we're going to talk about the opening range and the importance of that to the rest of the session. So again, honing in on the Europe session being between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so that's New York time, and 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York time. Those are the most important times to me for intraday trading, and I'm going to show a few things today that might actually help support that. A lot of that has to do with order flow. I'm not going to go into that too much today about order flow, but essentially what that is when the markets open, the banks will, or the institutions will be executing orders that are part of their general day-to-day world commerce. So that's companies, organizations, banks that are doing business and converting currency on a daily basis that keeps things ticking over in the economy. And just for a simple example, you go online, you order something on eBay, it comes from the UK and you're paying in US dollars. There has to be some kind of currency exchange that takes place. So that's just a small scale example of the billions of dollars, trillions of dollars going through the foreign exchange market. So that's a critical time frame. London handles the bulk of world trading for currency, approximately 30%. And so when London opens, there tends to be a large amount of order flow that causes what's termed the London breakout often, where there's a big push into the market. And again, there's some other factors there, but today we'll just go over a couple of simple things. So just going back to the previous day on Tuesday, what I'll often do is I'll look for some example of where there's been support or resistance, and I call that a profile. It's the middle of the profile. So if that was a bell curve, we would have the middle of the bell curve right around where that 50% level is of that last range in the US session. So as Asia opened up today, we had a move down initially. Then as we headed into the London session, it consolidated, then strongly broke out. So here's our first candle of the London session. That market opened up, and if we come back and talk about opening range or the initial balance, what we like to look at is that first couple of hours of the session. Now, as London started to trade, it was pretty obvious as we headed into the US session that those short positions were holding strong, and they were holding strong underneath the previous day's buying areas. So just looking at some really simple key support and resistance levels, bearish short traders that traded the breakout had a fairly low risk entry, at least 1-to-1 to where orders would get filled. More short orders were triggered, and that market continued to trend down well into the US session in that first 3 hours between 8 and 11. So again, just keeping it simple, looking at some support and resistance, some order flow at the beginning of the market sessions, and just some really basic patterns. Now, if we went back to Tuesday's session, we saw the same thing occur. Monday was an auction day where that market traded in a range, but as Asia opened, even if we use an initial balance in Asia, sorry, we'll just mark that off. So we've got our initial range. What that means is in a majority of the cases, one of those extremes tends to hold for the session, which we saw here. The lows, the buyers underneath of this area held that area. They bought it up. As the London session opened up, it sold off heavily, and then into the US session that trend continued. Now again, opening range of London, one of the extremes held, so sellers came in above that 125 area, and they held that for this session. US session, opening range, sellers came in and they maintained control, and that was one of the extremes. So just looking at some really simple concepts, looking at order flow, support and resistance. Pound Canadian. So previous day, I'm not going to back up the daily, but we've had some sideways movement and a couple of levels holding for buying and selling on the daytime, but I'm just going to draw this support level across. Now again, coming back to our opening range for Asia, try and get this to line up. Opening range, the market traded and held that level above the first hour, traded down, auctioned back inside as London opened up. Then our first bar in the London session showed bullish activity. Now we know there's selling orders up above here. The market broke out, found resistance at the previous day's support level, auctioned back down, but interestingly enough, as we headed into the US session, that level of buying from the first 2 hours of London held underneath. So we see some buying tails, okay, but those buyers maintained control under that 130, 2.0, 130 level. And as we had a breakout into the US session, we had an announcement. We saw some selling activity again at the previous level of selling, but those sellers were unable to take it any lower. Buyers came back into the market. So, one candle, if you were buying here, you're looking at a one candle stop and possibly a 2 to 1 to the high of the Europe session. So that market continued to move up into the US session. Pound. So again, the pink just designates the color of the markets being traded. So we have the Asian session, the London session into the early part of the US, and then the US session. So again, we see selling resistance from Tuesday come across that level. Last area where sellers came in the US session. So Asia auctioned sideways and stayed for the most part inside of its initial balance. Buyers held and sellers held. As we headed into London, our first candle took out the London high, formed an outside bar. We saw an inside bar set up, and then another outside bar. So there was some news releases, a bit of volatility, but no clear conviction. Sellers holding above yesterday's selling levels from that institutional selling over on Tuesday. Monday. And then buyers holding underneath. We saw some buying tails heading into the US session, but notice how those are lower lows and lower highs. Selling activity right off the bat into the US and a breakout. So sellers came in. We're looking at roughly a 50 pip range sort of in this area, but the selling came back and retested the buying levels from Tuesday. So again, support, resistance, support, resistance. Nothing else on here. You can see there's nothing to hide. And again, even heading into the US session, you'll see that bullish buying level from the London session was not able to follow through after we saw lower high, lower low. And then the US selling, as soon as smart traders may have traded the breakout of this candle. One bar stop, small bar, you're looking 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1 maybe. So simple support and resistance. I know in retrospect this can look easy, but always look to buy low and sell high. And the time frames are critical if you're trading intraday for when that order flow can change, and that's usually that first few hours of the market session. So the pound yen, we see resistance, selling pressure coming in at the US near the U.S. close. Asian highs formed a layer of support somewhat into Europe, but as soon as we saw this activity come back down in Asia, auction back up into the London session, aggressive traders definitely could have went long here into the open of London. That market immediately sold off again, and into the US session came back down to where there was buying support from Asia and London. You can see the tails, but essentially that market auctioned sideways for most of the 24-hour session. So a couple key concepts, just again looking at support and resistance, but also the opening range. So for Asia, opening range, first 2 hours of the day. Market makers, whatever we want to call them, okay, one of those extremes held. Buyers took over. It auctioned back down towards the lows at the end of the session. Then as London opened, its first 2 hours, one of the extremes held for the bulk of that breakout. As we headed into the US session, that's when we saw some choppy activity and we had an auction occur. So we had both sides of the market traded fairly heavily in that first half of the session. So just keeping it simple, look at support and resistance. Always trade in your own best interest. Stay disciplined, and may the markets go with you. I hope you got some value out of today's session. If you like it, please share it on Facebook. I'd love to have any of your comments or feedback. Hi traders, it's Stacey Burke from Stacey Burke Trading. If you haven't done so, please head over to my website at staceyburketrading.com. I create updates on almost a daily basis, and I would love for you to receive them. Just click on the blog. If you want to enter your name and your email address, I'll send you my free audio program, the 7-Step Daily Routine for High Performance Traders. This is essential knowledge for all traders in all markets, and this is for helping traders to master the market with discipline, confidence, and a winning mindset. I appreciate all your feedback and comments. As always, traders, stay disciplined, and may the markets go with you.